Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season 2 finale of Outer Range. Great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I'm going to start off with the Perry side of things because that's going to be like the biggest question mark in a lot of ways of, once again, the time travel shenanigans of how it works, the paradoxes, and it's just like how you can kind of get away with paradoxes without there potentially being any like space-time continuum collapsing type of stuff. But we'll kind of get into that because it seems like we are just straight up dealing with alternate timelines, because my biggest thing going for it was, okay, so how do we deal with the fact is that Perry met a young royal, and he obviously doesn't remember that, but I was like, will he not remember until Perry comes back? Because he didn't remember the Joy stuff until Joy came back, but once again, that was a traumatic thing, and, you know, I've regurgitated this point over and over again. But either way, it was interesting because we're picking up where Perry's story had left off previously, and he was, you know, just threw his wedding ring in the hole, and Royal tells him a story of like, right, two brothers who inherited a farm from their father. And it was interesting because it was about the oldest and youngest, which is so interesting considering it almost reflects the Tillersons, except they have a middle child, which feels poetic considering like, right, the oldest child is dead and now the youngest is dead, which is also interesting too because Perry's the one who killed the older one, which that ties into Perry's stuff even more. Like I said, there's so many connections where I was like, obviously it feels like a more direct parallel to Rhett and Perry, but still, I don't know if that's almost kind of foreshadowing their future, or maybe what their relationship was and could have been. Maybe that's also like when he sees Red again, he hugs him because it's like, well, because of me, like your life kind of got turned upside down. You did a lot to try and protect me, so maybe that's why that will. We'll get that up when we get to it, but Royal told him that story, and it was basically about the oldest son who felt like, oh, the youngest has father's favor and he's not going to leave anything to me. It should go to me, but my legacy isn't like, you know, it's not like all sealed and delivered. It's like, yeah, I still have to kind of work for it. So a wild horse came onto their property and he tried to tame it. Before he could even get past the first hoof, he got kicked. Didn't die, but was paralyzed, and he had to watch as his brother got everything he believed he deserved. So it's like, what's the point of the story? It's like, don't try to tame something. Stop tampering with something wild will get you kicked. And it's like, you don't belong here. Go home, Perry, and pushes him, which is like, yeah, a lot of people getting pushed into these holes, huh? So, because that's what Autumn's plan is, to like throw Amy into the hole, but then you also have the situation of, well, Autumn pushed Royal into the hole. So it's like, yeah, just history constant repeating with that situation. So you're like, okay, but there's no guarantee that Perry's going to go home, but he shows up and you're like, wait. I was like, well, he's at the farm, but then you notice the vehicles are outside. It's like, well, we know that Royal, and like, no one's at the house because Rhett already had left, so he wouldn't be there. And also Royal's with Cecilia, so I'm like, when is he? And he looks and he sees Amy and them. I'm like, that's interesting. And then he thinks about, I guess, the time frame, and it turns out this is the night he killed Trevor, which his whole point was, oh, I want to make things right. So he shows up, stops past Perry, who's looking like, wait, what the fuck? There's another me. Trevor punches Perry and basically kills him. Like, instead of Trevor dying that way, it's actually Perry. And now Trevor's looking like, wait, there's another Perry, but Perry's dead here. What? Runs off. If he explains that to his dad, that's going to be interesting. But in that moment, Perry's just kind of like, well, what the hell do I do? It's like, well, we covered up the crime previously. It's like, I'm like, are you about to replace yourself? Because I was like, you didn't fade out of existence. So I'm like, all right, my understanding is we're in an alternate timeline because, you know, it's like, right, once again, it's a paradox. So it's like, right, you at this time is dead, so why take the chance? Because you never know, like, if you go in that hole, there's no guarantee you'll go back to where you want to go. But also, that time you're going back to is post you killing Trevor. Now it's like, well, this version of you is dead and you're just going to replace him. So you pick him up, toss him in the hole, not after taking off the wedding ring. It's like, oh, poetic. That, hey, you toss your wedding ring in the hole, and now you've gotten it back, funny enough, like almost immediately. But to be fair, it's like, right, he's got to play the role of Perry of this point in time, because it's like, if he doesn't have his ring, they're going to be like, why don't you have your ring? You know, but also maybe there's some symbolism of, I still want it back. I kind of regret throwing it away. I'm going more the former rather than the latter, but yeah. Perry ends up going home, and he tells Rhett, like, yeah, me and Trevor got into a fight, but we both got bruised up. And then he hugs him. And he's like, oh, Amy wants me to tell you a story. I'll tell you some stories. And he walks past his dad. But Royal kind of gives this look like, I was like, does Royal know? But I'm like, he hasn't really connected with the other version of himself. So I'm like, there's no way he would know. And then I was thinking, like, what I meant, like, right, because at the same time, present day Royal was going through some stuff. So I was like, was there a connection there? But why would that matter? Like, present day Royal would know nothing about it. And then I was like, it wasn't even until like well after the episode was over, before I even started this recording, I felt stupid. I was like, because this is the future. This isn't the past of Perry's timeline. This is the past. This is the future of the timeline Perry was on, where he met the younger version of his dad. So that's why he had that look on his face, because he probably remembered Perry had this exact wounds on his face when I threw him in a hole all those years ago. So this is a Royal that's already met Perry and everything. That's why he had that look on his face, like, oh, so it must have happened. So when I tossed you in a hole, you must have ended up here. So what happened to my Perry? I don't know if Royal's piece that. He definitely knows something was up, like that look on his face. So I don't know if that's just an indication of where him and Perry were at that point in the relationship in the story. But it felt like that might have, now sitting on it, it feels like that might have been an indication that this is the future version of that young Royal that he met. And so, yeah, I've got some idea potentially of what's going on here, so we'll see. But so that means Perry's entire story is going to take place in an alternate timeline. So it does seem like this is going to be that time travel thing of when something's undone or changed, that timeline doesn't disappear, it just splinters off into something else. We're very much like Loki it with like how a lot of the TVA stuff works. So that's interesting just to think about, like, right, his storyline is in its own timeline, like, and how will things play out. I mean, it's going to be interesting, too, because Perry still being there, like, because the trouble with the Trevor thing, like, led to the foundation of just, like, so much stuff happening. So with that massive change and Perry knowing what he knows now, this is also a Cecilia and Rhett who don't know about the whole. This is only Perry knowing about the whole. This is also a Perry who doesn't know that Amy and Autumn are the same person. So what does that mean? There's also a timeline where, hey, Trevor's still alive, so maybe Luke doesn't die, and maybe Billy doesn't die, or maybe just things, maybe Trevor survives and the other two die. Like, there's just so much that can change in this time frame where it's like, not quite sure. I mean, especially considering, like, Autumn has, like, touched the mineral, so you'd almost think, like, other versions of her might be affected. We've only met, once again, maybe it's because they're in the same time frame currently, but maybe you can only connect with one version of yourself at a time, like Wayne connected with that version of him, the younger version of himself. Maybe Autumn would be the same way, where, like, the only, to be fair, she did connect with, like, or at least in her head, it was like a teenage version of herself. So there was Amy, and then there was teenage Autumn. So maybe on some level she did, but she only connected with, like, the Amy that was coexisting in the same time as her. So maybe the Autumn of that alternate timeline will not know about what the other Autumn and Amy situation is in the mainline timeline. So that is my speculation based on my experience of time travel, movies, TV shows, and video games. So we'll have to wait to see, but it's like that, a massive question mark in this show. Another storyline that really surprised me is the Rhett situation, like him making that deal with Nia. Being like, yeah, I'll convince my dad, but you know what you're going to do is you're going to pay me 30 grand up front to have a conversation with my dad, and you're going to pay me again to convince him to do what's right, because I'm actually helping you. I'm doing what you said. You're paying me to be a good son. You're not paying me to have a conversation with my dad. You're paying me to be a good son, because if you try to fight my dad, you will lose this battle. So he's like, right. What you're going to do is, going forward, now that when this is all set in motion, you are going to make sure no one else like you ever shows up trying to take our land. So I think Rhett's just trying to, like, he's trying to protect his family, but also trying to make a payday, because I think this is supposed to kind of be his exit strategy of, I want to take some money, like, also protect my family, ensure they're good, everything's fine, and then because, like, right, this is too outside of our realm of understanding. Despite everything, Royal doesn't know a lot about this whole and how everything works. So having someone else discover and figure out could potentially help his family in a long run, but it can also help Rhett save up enough money so that him and Maria can leave for good. And he just wants to make sure his family's in a better place before that happens. But there's always going to be literal and metaphorical horde of bison in your way. What's also interesting too, speaking of Maria, we catch her at the bank, like, you know, snatching like just a little bit, kind of pocketing some of the money. But I'm like, I'd assume this might tie into that future storyline of what Amy Autumn was referencing about, like, right, you should leave him before he leaves you. So once again, my thought was, well, Rhett will probably leave you for family obligations. So it's like, but it seemed like such a cautionary thing of, I mean, I guess once again, you'd rather be the one to leave than be left behind, which once again, Amy knows what that's like. So that's why she was also speaking from that point of like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it seemed like there was some element of, I don't want you to be hurt because being left behind broke me in a lot of ways. And I don't want that for you, Maria, you don't deserve it. So just a little peek into that storyline. I'm just like, where is that going to go? Is that just her setting up her own insurance policy so that she has the money to disappear and just kind of go? And I don't know if that's supposed to be like a, right, I don't want to feel so reliant on Rhett. Like, maybe it is a thing of I should take Autumn's advice and try to leave on my own. I don't know. So, speaking of Autumn, she's on her journey with Luke, which she ends up talking to him about. You know, they eventually get on the subject of Billy, and, you know, he reveals, like, right, I hurt Billy, and she's like, did you mean to? And he was like, no. But she's like, yeah, don't worry about it. Death isn't, like, there are things in life, like, nothing's, like, final in life, not even death, which are like, well, it seems like that comes full circle at the end of the episode, but we'll get to that. Her showing up at the place, the woman's shelter where her mom and her past self are, it benefits you now having all your memories, because she's like, oh yeah, I know exactly who you guys are. It's like, you're you, and oh yeah, like her cousins are. Like, I'm Autumn. I'm Rebecca's sister. So, you know, Amy knows Autumn enough to be like, oh, hey, you, what are you doing here? Hey, you want to go see your grandma and grandpa? And your dad is like, yeah, I like being with my mom, but I miss being with them. It's like, do you think grandma's upset with me over us? It's like, you know, you said what you said at the time, but, you know, they love you and they'll forgive you because they miss you like crazy. Which has got to be weird considering knowing what she's got planned. But it's still like, there's such, I think, a disconnect where I do believe Autumn had some, like, because if you notice, like, she only referred to Royal as grandpa one time. She was like, because that was like her memories and like past, present, and future are all colliding at once in her head, and she was writing shit on the walls, and even I think even on her arms. But yeah, she was not in the right, like, she wasn't Autumn at that time. She was kind of everything all at once. So that's the only time she never refers to Cecilia as like grandma, unless she's talking to Amy in this regard. But like, yeah, she refers to him as Royal and Cecilia because I guess it's her way to distance herself because, right, I'm not Amy. Despite being your granddaughter, I'm not Amy. I'm Autumn. You know, the girl that you know, and I brought this up last episode. The episode title for this is The End of Innocence. And it's like, right, destroying the innocence of who she was as Amy to become Autumn because it's part of her destiny that she's trying to manifest. So yeah, it's got to be interesting being like, right, I'm older and here I am confronting my mom. And it's like, right, I am Amy. She's like, you're crazy. It's like, the day you left, you sat on the porch with me working on like a crossword puzzle. And because I guess at the time you were trying to figure out how to leave, 2 weeks prior, you told me you're going to take me to the movies, but you kind of passed out because you were drinking. It's like, how could you know that? It's because I am Amy, you know? And even her last words to Rebecca was, Cecilia was right to scare you off because, as we know, Rebecca eventually left her behind. It's like, yeah, she's like, I got adopted into a family because my mom wouldn't tell me anything about my... Now, I don't know if, once again, at the time I was thinking she was referencing Rebecca, but what if she was actually referencing her adopted mom being like, oh, I don't want to tell you about your past or whatever, or what I know. But then it's also that self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, the reason why your mom abandoned you, because she was also making a point of, you didn't steal us out of love, you stole us out of spite, just to get back, because Cecilia scared you off and you wanted to hurt her. That's the reason why you took me. Like, you know, and it even gave her some of the mineral so that she could see the future of, yeah, this is her, like, coming back into Amy's life, but, like, Autumn's already started, like, the cult and everything. And it's like, right, you were never a mother and you never will be, or something like that was Autumn's line. So it's just like, yeah, her mom never came back into her life until much later. It's like, oh, after I'm kind of made something for myself, word got back to you, now you want to be a mom even though you never really were one. It is interesting because you're confronting your daughter who has the age and wisdom to know, like, oh, I know what bullshit you pull. I also know what my life became because of you. You were not a good mother, you know, and Cecilia was right to scare you off. And so she leaves with Amy. Eventually, Royal and Cecilia show up, but once again, they'd already left with Amy, so... And then Rebecca's kind of like, oh my, you know, because it's like, oh my God, she's special, kind of like her connection to time and stuff. And it's like, she's always had a special connection to all this. That's driving her motivation to be like, yeah, like I have a greater destiny, which on the phone, Cecilia and Royal were like talking to her, like not to do this. And even Autumn being like, you know, Royal, if it wasn't for you, I never would have known I was Amy. It's like, unfortunately, your attempt to save your granddaughter with everything that was going on ended up kind of blowing up in your face, because now in the long run you ended up putting her in danger. You know, the poeticness of, right, you were trying to save your granddaughter and now that's led to the season finale where your granddaughter's in danger. It is interesting and sad how, you know, you try to do one right thing, how the dominoes fall in a way you don't see coming. Though, granted, Autumn, in her mind, does. She doesn't see the full picture. She claims to, but we only see bits and pieces to it, so I think even she doesn't have the full picture of everything. Because Roy was trying to get across the point, your destiny is just like everyone else. You're not someone, you don't have a grander destiny than someone else, which she's like, time will tell, but... It is a sad thing of, like, once again, like, her experiences are what made her what she is. I mean, it's kind of like the dangers of knowing the future too much. It's like, how much of time is set in stone, how much is like, oh, her future is going to be what she thinks it is, versus, like, once again, you're not seeing the full picture. You think you are, but maybe there's stuff beyond that you don't know the aftermath of, and there's so many other timey-wimey things going on, like your dad being in an alternate timeline, like how much of an effect that potentially will have on things, what that might mean in the long run. Can things be altered, or will everything always play out the way it's meant to? Like, will Royal die 2 years from now? Like Cecilia had said, like, oh yeah, you died. Or no, it wasn't even 2 years from now, because all she said was like, 2 years ago, you died in my arms. So, and then all the stuff that's happening on the farm and stuff, it's like, is that an inevitability? Can you change any of that? Or is everything just kind of set in stone of like, no, like, it is what it is. There's no changing it. Things are meant to be a way, and that's all there is to it. Just like Autumn feels like her destiny is what it is. It's meant to be what it is. I'm meant to go down this path. It's got to play out this way. I've got to go through what I got to go through as Amy to get to where I am. Despite the hurt I'm going to cause my grandparents, the fact is it's worth it in the end, because I have a bigger purpose. Amy has a bigger purpose in all of this to become me, who has a bigger purpose in all of this. So they ended up calling up Joy for help. I guess they didn't want to call Rhett because, well, they don't know what Rhett's up to, but also like, right, Rhett's already in a legal trouble situation. Last thing we need is kind of like, well, I don't think it's purely Perry in that situation now, not Rhett. Once again, didn't Rhett cover for him in season 1, so he was in some legal trouble, but then it all fell onto Perry because he confessed, I think. I don't remember now. But, like, he was in some form of legal trouble. Because he went to court and everything. Like, I mean, obviously the family had to be there, but I think it's because Rhett was actually in court and stuff for that stuff as well. Either way, I guess they also don't want him getting mixed up in this. Calling in Joy, it's like, well, you get an officer dealing with it, which Joy's going through some stuff. She wakes up in the yard. She apparently slept out there because apparently she couldn't sleep. But then she wakes up and there's a whole bunch of animals and you're like, what the fuck does that mean? I was like, is she on her Snow White? And she in like her Snow White bag or whatever? I'm like, all these animals just pulled up in the yard staring, and Joy doesn't know what to make of it. Like, I have no idea what this is. But she gets called by Royal to like handle the Autumn thing. It's like, well, we'll fill you in on all that later. But love what she was doing. She was standing like she was outside like Shelton Cape like place, the same like company or whatever that like sold her a house. Which once again she ran into like a Shelton, back in the 1880s. So feels kind of wild. Like once again, a lot of that issues then. Maybe there's some of that still in that family now, but it's just, or maybe it's just, once again, she can't quite shake it of like, right, I was there for 4 years. I saw who that man was and he was evil. And does that mean the rest of the family is? No, but it's just, I think it's just something she can't quite shake. It's still like, she's still unmoored. She's so unnerved by everything. So I'm so curious to see where that goes. But yeah, she was at the hole waiting for Luke, which I love. Luke came out being like, oh, I guess you care more about the Abbotts than what happened to my brother, and pistol whipped the shit out of him. I mean, not even pistol whipped him, just like smacked the ever-living shit out of him with a shotgun. Also, it's like, you ain't got no business saying jack shit considering you just murdered your younger brother. Fuck you. Shut up, Luke. But yeah, she tries to get Autumn to let Amy go. And it's like, right, like we don't have to do this, but Autumn's like, this has to happen. And given the opportunity, Joy shoots her. I was like, okay. Because I brought it up previously. I was like, there's a good chance the sad cycle could repeat where it's like Amy goes in a hole, but Autumn ends up dead, meaning she'll always come back to this point to die. But it's like, well, what about all that other stuff? It's like, well, maybe time isn't as stuck in stone, but we find out it actually is. Everything kind of plays out the way it's meant to. So Amy falls in a hole. Autumn got shot. They take her to the hospital to try and patch her up, and it seemed like she did die for a little bit of time. She died, but then at the same time, Amy in the past is waking up. Slowly and behold, so does Autumn, which is going to probably add more fuel to the fire, especially because like there's people there praying for Autumn at the hospital and stuff, and hearing that she miraculously came back to life, like coming back from the dead, especially with all her like culty religious stuff, is probably going to play a massive role into why the cult gets as big as it does and why it has the following it does. So it is kind of sad. Amy's gone. At least Autumn's not dead, but it once again proves that everything is going to happen the way it's going to. So the future is still going to be what Autumn saw it to be, with her building her cult with Luke by her side. So once again, you haven't gotten the full picture, so things might not be all sunshine and roses like you think it will be. Because at the same time all that was happening, Royal, we don't know if he was like having a heart attack or what. I don't know if it's like something connected to the hole, because just as Amy was being tossed in a hole, Autumn was shot, the hole closes, like all that's kind of happening at the same time. Royal's kind of potentially having a heart attack. Maybe he's just stressed about everything, especially because he was just like delirious a little bit and being like, oh yeah, remember the last dinner we had before Rebecca left? Like Amy was laughing because she thought everything was funny. It just felt like that was obviously all connected because the timing was too coincidental. But yeah, he wakes up in the hospital fine, but he's hearing about what happened to Amy, and then Autumn's okay. And he's telling Joy, like, right, we've got to stop the future from happening. But she's like, yeah, you can't stop the future. He's seen part of it, especially like he had that when he was out, he saw this vision of like so many people, because he saw like a young version of Cecile as well as present day Cecile. He saw versions of himself, a younger version of him. He saw his dad. He saw his, because he saw the kid version and the younger version of himself that Perry met. I don't know if we saw Rhett there. I think Rhett was there. Yeah, because he was with Maria, and then we had Perry beside Autumn, which it feels poetic that everyone else is front and center, and those two are off on their own, which are like, what is that supposed to represent? I mean, to be fair, that is father and daughter, sure, but it's still kind of like, right, they're the ones in the mix of all this time travel stuff in their own ways that you're like, feels poetic for them to be kind of out on their own in that capacity. But it's like, right, time, what was it like, time is your destiny, Royal, or something like that? Like basically kind of telling him he can't run from anything. And even that line from Autumn being like, right, this is just the beginning. And it kind of makes me go like, oh, is this going to be some 12 monkeys of the end is the beginning and the beginning is the end type of situation? We'll see. I'm curious to see what happens going forward with Autumn, because it's like, well, you kind of got rid of our granddaughter despite you being our granddaughter, and it's like you're kind of a little crazy. So how do you both come to terms with that? Because I was thinking last episode, I was like, maybe if Perry gets back, maybe he will be able to stop Autumn if he finds out the truth about who she really is. But it's like, well, considering he's in the past of an alternate, but in an alternate timeline, then maybe in that alternate timeline he can prevent things from ever happening that way, despite Autumn's, well, because Autumn, she has a plan and stuff, but she doesn't have the full scope of everything like she does present day. There's also the element of Wayne. Wayne came home to find his son dead. His baby boy, like two of his boys are dead. Calls out Luke for being a Judas, saying like, right, you were kind of jealous of your brother. Like, yeah, this is it. This is over. Like, we're going to have problems. And so he burns down the house. He was staying in it for a little while, but I was like, there's no way Wayne's going to kill himself. Maybe he was contemplating it, but he decides like, right, you've got to have some plan for me. He hears something and makes his way all the way to the hole. So he's like, please talk to me, give me a sign, which it seems like it did. So it's like, how much of that is like you are connected to the hole directly because of all the mineral stuff you've done, or versus like, maybe that was all in your head. But he was like, oh, like, you filled me in on a plan, and he jumps in a hole. God knows what time he's going to go back to, which is considered interesting, too, because at the beginning, Cecilia and Royal had that conversation about, she's like, wish you could go back in time to change so much. But Royal was like, nah, but we just got to look to the future, which is so interesting considering the end of the episode is about how dangerous the future is going to be. So we have people changing the past like Perry, but now he's on an alternate timeline, maybe. And then Wayne, we have no idea what that's going to involve, what that's going to twist and contort things to, and if he'll manage to find his way back. We didn't really see Luke after getting knocked the hell out by Joy, so, but obviously we know he's going to be by Autumn's side with everything, so. Oh, and speaking of Amy, when she woke up, we can kind of see where the name Autumn came from, because she, I guess because of the trauma of it all, she blocked it, and so she didn't remember. She was like, I think my name is Autumn. I think it's because that was the last name she really heard, and it's like with everything, like that's the only thing that stuck, because traumatically it's like, yo, this lady kidnapped you and tossed you in a hole and threatened you with a gun. I'm like, yeah, like that name meant something to her at the time, which is so traumatic and so effed up that, oh, your name Autumn came about because you were remembering the crazy woman that kidnapped you, which was a future version of yourself. You're like, oh, Jesus. The paradox and twistedness of it all. So that is a lot of craziness with this season finale. I'm so interested to see what the future holds. At the time of me recording this, it is the 25th, I believe. I'll probably end up putting this up either Sunday or Monday. I haven't decided yet. But at the time of me recording this, it still hasn't been decided whether the show's coming back for a third season or not. To be fair, it's only been out for like a little over a week at this point in time this season, so we'll have to give it some time to see what Prime Video ultimately decides. I hope they do decide to continue the show, not just for Thursday. Well, however long it takes to tell whatever story they have to tell, whether it's 3 seasons, 4 seasons, 5 seasons, whatever the case may be. I believe I was reading a quote from Josh Brolin. Apparently I didn't even talk about this. I believe it was last episode. He directed last episode, which was neat. But I want to say, like, he's like, yeah, he's pitched some ideas for season 3 with, like, the writers. I think specifically the showrunner of the show. It might have been the creator, but I think it's the showrunner. I don't think they're the same person, the creator of the show and the showrunner, but whatever the case may be. Maybe they are. But he was pitching some ideas, like had some ideas for what season 3 might entail. I only read like a little bit of the quote, but it was almost like he initially thought the show was going to be a one and done, but obviously like I guess along the way they found more story they wanted to tell and thought would be interesting to tell. So there's still so many threads and so many ways this can go. Once again, we still have not narrowed down how this time travel shit works, of like what the rules of it are, because we are paradoxing all over the place. We are alternate timelining this bitch, so it's going to be really interesting to see how this all potentially plays out. Like I said, fingers crossed. I really enjoy this show. And it took us almost, I don't know I know season 1 came out in 2022, but I don't remember I don't know if I wonder was this show kind of held back because of like the writer strike? Like, was it done earlier, but they pulled it back because maybe it wasn't done because of the writer strike, or what? Because obviously it's been like obviously 2022 versus 2024, but like I said, I don't remember what time frame in 2022 the first season dropped. So it's probably hasn't been 2 years, but it probably has been like maybe a year and a half or something, something like that. So it might be another year and a half. If it did come back with a third season, it'll probably be like another year or so, probably a year and a half or so before we get season 3. Just depends on a lot of stuff. Because also the difference is the first season was dropped 2 episodes a week. This was dropped all at once. Once again, Prime Video flips back and forth with that stuff with a lot of their shows. So either way, like I said, I'll keep an eye out on any updates and news about the future of the show. I'll be very, very excited to see what they do with a potential season 3 and maybe beyond. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.